If you are from America, Philadelphia especially, and you pay attention to which are the worst parts of the country, then you know which part of Philadelphia is astronomically worse than all the other surrounding areas. The place I am talking about is North Philly, specifically Kensington. This area is ravaged by drugs, theft, murder, and just about anything you can think of. But if you ask residents what is the worst thing to plague this unfortunate area, they will all say the drug use. Check it out yourself. Soft White Underbelly did an incredible job capturing the streets of Kensington. You'll see all these poor and innocent people taken over by their drug addiction, trying to grab the next high as quickly as possible. The people there simply do not care anymore because they don't have a choice from their addictions. Heroin is very cheap there compared to everywhere else. And there is another drug called xylazine, or trank dope, that has been hitting the streets and is becoming very popular. Since the heroin is so cheap, Kensington is a choice region for addicts to shoot up in. I know if I was a political figure in Philadelphia, I would try my best to fix that place up. I'm sure they are trying over there, but they're not trying hard enough. It just makes me very sad to see what some parts of America look like. It seriously is almost apocalyptic. But going on from that, I had the opportunity to receive a heartbreaking story from the North Philly, Kensington area about Suboxone withdrawal. Some parts of the story may disturb you, but if you are a loyal listener, then you already know that most of these stories I read are disturbing. But if you're new, then I'm giving you a little warning now. I've definitely had worse stories on here, but that doesn't take away from the insanity in this story. Without further ado, let's get started. The following is one of my experiences from attempting to induce myself on Suboxone. Before anyone says the obvious, buprenorphine is in no way psychedelic, and when used properly, has been extremely beneficial in my life. But anyone who has taken some too soon after using opiates knows the pure agony and hell that your body and mind will go through. This combined with dehydration and malnourishment is only comparable to a very, very bad trip. A little bit of background. I've been a regular drug user from a pretty young age, 12, and was dependent on opiates on and off from the age of 18 to 29. This experience was in 2019 while I was living in a rented room in North Philly. I've recently relapsed following the death of my father and was on the run from parole, so I had some issues, to say the least. I was spending roughly $80 a day on heroin, which was most likely just fentanyl and research chemicals. And as you could expect, my life was spiraling out of control. The extreme anxiety and depression that comes with being dependent on such strong opiates is incredible. Like I said, I have been using opiates of all kinds for years before this. I've been in withdrawal what seems like a million times, but the dope I was getting at the time was on a whole different level. I would wake up mid-anxiety attack literally every morning, which wouldn't subside until I used or walked to Kensington to get more. I looked like a skeleton and knew going back to jail was inevitable if I didn't quit. But the withdrawal was so extreme every time that I can never go more than a couple hours without giving up. My solution was something I was very familiar with. Wait long enough until the opiate was out of my system and take a sub. If only it was that easy. I did the last of my dope at around 3 a.m. and planned on passing out for a couple hours, lay in bed all day, then take a piece of sub at roughly 9 p.m. that night. I woke up around 1 p.m. and binged Trailer Park Boys to pass the time. At around 7 p.m., I was reaching the point in withdrawal that usually causes me to give up. I had all the telltale signs, and although it's tough to accurately assess yourself in that state, I scored myself as a 4 on the clinical opiate withdrawal scale, or COWS. Thank God. It's time. 17 hours has to be enough. Man, was I wrong. I opened an 8 mg Suboxone strip and cut off approximately a 2 mg square. I have always hated the taste, and obviously preferred the bioavailability of intranasal use, so I placed the square on a spoon with a bit of water and let it dissolve. As I tilted my head back and sniffed, I was eagerly awaiting feeling better. I remember saying to myself, in a little bit of time, you'll be feeling just fine. About 5 minutes later, I felt the first sign of the hell to come. A cold, metal-like shiver slowly made its way up my spine. This can't be good. I sat up and began to panic. What did I just do to myself? Goosebumps covered my entire body, and I instantly felt extreme nausea and diarrhea. Before I could even get off my bed, a putrid, disgusting yellow stomach bile literally exploded from my lips. I ran to my bathroom, but couldn't even make it the 20 feet to the toilet before it came out the other end as well. I remember sitting on the toilet, literally screaming at the top of my lungs in agony, while the yellow bile burst out in between breaths. My mouth kept filling up with saliva every 5 seconds, like I just took a drink. I kept swallowing, but that just caused me to throw up more. I also had an extremely bad metallic taste in my mouth that was somehow nostalgic. My skin felt like somebody stripped me of all my clothes, threw me on an iceberg in Antarctica, and the only thing I had to keep me warm was lava. I shuffled back to bed and convinced myself this will only last 45 minutes after a quick Google search on PW. I wish. For some reason, the symptoms lessened a bit and I attempted to smoke a cigarette. I'm not sure if this is actually what caused it, but while smoking, I unconsciously sniffed and tasted a drip of sub go down the back of my throat. Oh shit. Just like that, all the symptoms returned, just as extreme as before. I did not know what to do. I remember laying in a child's pose and periodically screaming into my pillow, just wishing it would end. I would lay there for 36 more hours. I started becoming delirious sometime that night. I had multiple voices in my head, and I became convinced there was little people living in my body, controlling and causing these symptoms. And not just any people, it was the trailer park boys. I saw Ricky and Bubbles with buckets attempting to bail out my saliva like they were bailing out a boat. Meanwhile, Randy and Mr. Leahy were sabotaging them in the process. The next day came and went as I laid there, dying. I could hear people outside, and I so desperately wanted to ask them for help, but I didn't even have the energy to plug my phone in the charger, let alone get anyone's attention. I didn't sleep, but I remember literally fantasizing of a red Gatorade, and at times truly thought someone brought me one, only to realize that nobody did. By this point, I was contemplating how I was going to tell my girlfriend and family I was crazy. The next morning, I knew I had to do something, or I was gonna die here. Of course, my plan was, instead of going to the emergency room, I would just go get more dope to hopefully end this nightmare. It took me hours to summon the energy to get out of bed and get dressed. From where I lived, it would usually take me about 20 minutes to walk to the EL at York Dauphin. This day, it took me close to an hour and a half. Every smell on the way was unbelievably putrid, and sounds literally hurt. The squeaking of the train on the rails felt like someone was stabbing me in both temples. I finally got off at K&A and made my way to Reach Street. The trap they were using at the time was about halfway up the block, and I could see people going in and out as I slowly shuffled forward. Okay, almost there. As I walked in the completely dark room, lighters flickered in corners as the smell of crack and piss filled my lungs and caused me to puke more yellow bile all over the steps leading back out to the street. With blurry vision, I lifted my head to see a police van speeding down the wrong way down the one-way street. I instinctively started walking away as nonchalant as possible, but as I heard the sliding of the van door as the tires screeched to a stop, I knew I was fucked. I wanted to run, but I just didn't have the energy. I heard the cop's voice say, "Good morning," as he walked in front of me, snapping on blue gloves. It's pretty common for cops to shut down a block like that down there, and usually they let the users go, unless of course you have a warrant. I was one of the roughly 12 people sitting on the curb while they ran our names. As I look back, I know I subconsciously wanted to get caught, but of course at the time, I just wanted to get the fuck out of there. Although I wasn't positive, I knew my parole officer had most likely issued a warrant for me a couple weeks prior. Lo and behold, he did. I remember the cuffs feeling like razors and my hair feeling like icicles as the cop pulled down my hood and put me in the back of the van. The door slamming shut sent a sharp shock throughout my whole body. The only thing I remember about the rest of the ride was the cops laughing. I didn't know Justin Bieber did dope. Thankfully, the cop that arrested me asked if I thought I needed medical attention, and they took me to Temple University Hospital. The male nurse that was tending to me was getting pissed I wouldn't undress and put on the smock they gave me, but I just couldn't. The floral design of the curtain around my bed was twisting and morphing, and the beeping of the machine sounded like nails on a chalkboard. I was puking off the side of the bed as the nurse tried to hook up the IV. I remember him saying, "You gotta stay still or you're gonna get hurt," to which I replied, "You're the one that's gonna get hurt." He obviously wasn't happy with that response and said, "All right, man," threw up his hands and left. At this point, I saw my mom standing on the side of my bed. She was 80 miles away, telling me to calm down, and what would I do if someone treated her like that? She's an RN. The doctor finally came over. I remember his hand touching my leg, feeling like it was covered in hot spikes. I'm not sure if he was aware of the differences between regular withdrawal and my withdrawal, and I felt like they thought I was overreacting. He talked to me about my use and implied that the only thing that would make me feel better is an opiate, and he was not going to give me any. He ordered me the usual withdrawal meds, clonidine and Imodium IV fluids, and left. I laid there completely defeated. I could not believe all of this just happened. If there was ever a sign to stop, this is it. I prayed silently and swore I wouldn't touch any opiates if God could just make this pass. Then, the doctor came back. "How you doing, buddy?" I just looked at him and shook my head. You know, at the other hospital I work at, they have methadone to help with this. Let me go see if we have it here. My addict, manipulating brain saw a golden opportunity from this statement. I'll get him to give me something. The doctor came back a couple minutes later and said unfortunately we don't have methadone. At this point, I haven't given them a urine sample and refused to speak to the crisis counselor. I started telling him how much I wanted to stop and how hard it's been, how I'm a good person and this isn't me. And then I went for it. "Doc, I'll go to rehab. I'll give you a urine, talk to the counselor, whatever. Please don't make me go there feeling like this." He responded with a couple of other questions about my use and listened to my heart. I knew I almost had him and used my ace in the hole. "Doc, I don't even know if I have any opiates in my system anymore. They won't even give me a detox bed without a dirty urine." He kinda stopped what he was doing and looked at me as to say touche. "Okay, I'll see what I can do." The male nurse from before came over a couple minutes later and gave me 2 milligrams of morphine. This did absolutely nothing as far as physical symptoms, but made it so I could at least try to sleep. I didn't, but used the next 2 hours or so thinking of the right way to ask for a bigger dose. Eventually, the doctor came back and asked how I was feeling. "Doc, I just got done telling you I've been taking Vicodin since I was 12, and you give me 2 milligrams? We're dealing with an opiate blocker here. You gotta at least give me 10. I knew he wasn't gonna give me 10 milligrams, but I figured I'd start off high. He started saying why he couldn't, my body weight, etc. But eventually, we settled on 8 milligrams. I was ecstatic. Dying, but ecstatic. The male nurse came back, and just as he plunged it in my IV, I instantly sat up and felt the only good feeling I've had in what seemed like forever. The nurse noticed this and said, "Hey, you're not supposed to like this anymore," jokingly. His words faded just as Peter Frampton's solo in "Do You Feel Like I Do" came over the hospital PA. All of my symptoms disappeared instantly, and I laid back in relief, listening to Frampton rip. 3 minutes later, that good feeling disappeared, and I was back to hell. But that little bit of relief allowed me to somehow fall asleep on and off for a couple of hours, so I was extremely grateful. I ended up going to rehab the next day, but wasn't right mentally for a couple of weeks. I have never felt something so extreme in my life. I remember thinking it would be a great interrogation tool because nobody would be able to endure this feeling for very long. They actually dosed me the first day. Anyone who's been to rehab knows that doesn't happen. I basically slept the entire detox stay and can remember waking up one night and instantly saying to myself, "Thank God." Going to rehab also saved me from my legal issues from running, but till this day, I feel like getting caught saved my life. I wasn't gonna stop unless I was forced to. There's a reason why Kensington is the biggest open-air drug market. The accessibility and quality is unmatched, and for an addict, the temptation is hard to resist when you know you can always get it. If you are listening to this and are currently using, please get help. You may think you can kick on your own, but in my 12 plus years of using, I've never seen it work. Life will get better if you stop, I promise. And if you need someone to talk to, please DM me. I'm gonna end this with a rehab quote that has always stuck with me. Why give up everything for something small when you can give up something small and gain everything?